The Author's Shelf.
The Author's Shelf.
The Author's Shelf. The Author's Shelf. It's about books and stuff.
It's time to introduce today's guest. Andy Griffis is a former high school teacher, was the National Ambassador for the National Year of Reading in 2012. He's also an ambassador for the Indigenous Literary Foundation. I interviewed Andy in 2012 for Creative Kids Tales. At that time, his 21st book, Just Doomed, was released. Well, that was 2 years ago, and a lot has happened since then. Andy released his Treehouse series, which has gone on to be adapted for the stage. Forget Wikipedia, Andy has his own version of the Andypedia. This is a complete guide to every book, every story, and every character in the world of Andy Griffiths books. It's also a complete guide to everything you ever wanted to know about Andy himself. Andy has won over 50 Children's Choice Awards, written over 20 books, even had some of his stories adapted into television cartoon series. He's sold over 5 million copies worldwide, and for over 15 years his books have been consistently glued to the New York Times bestseller list. Andy is best known as the author of the much-loved Just series and The Day My Bum Went Psycho. In 2008, Andy became the first Australian author to win 6 Children's Choice Awards in 1 year for Just Shocking, smashing his previous record of 4 awards for the Bad Book series in 2005. Excuse me, if there is anyone in the world or universe who has not heard of Andy Griffiths, then you just haven't lived. Andy Griffiths, welcome to the Author's Shelf.
Thank you very much. That makes me sound very busy, that introduction there.
It does, doesn't it? Andy, I always begin by asking my guests what is their story, so please tell us, what is the Andy Griffiths story?
Well, I guess it started around about the age of 6 when I picked up a pen and a paper and wrote my dad a get well card that threatened him if he didn't get well, he would be doomed. And then I drew a picture of him being buried in the backyard. And he was sick at the time, but he got better really fast, and my writing career was launched. Basically, and I think everything I do in my books these days was done in that little letter, in that it took the idea of a a get well card and turned it on its head. So it turned it into a get well or else card. So it did the opposite of what the receiver would have been expecting. And if you look at all my books, they're all quite different in many ways, but the one thing that they all have is characters who do the opposite to what you're supposed to do. And I guess that's been a feature in my real life as well.
And it's proven to be a big winner.
Yeah, but at the beginning it didn't seem to be, and in fact it seemed to be a bit of a reason why I might never become a writer, because I just couldn't write a normal book. And when I say normal, I mean like the books that were published around, say, the late 80s, which is when I was starting. I couldn't write a sensible book with some sort of moral or some sort of redeeming value. Just I had all these characters running around like maniacs, destroying themselves and just creating anarchy and chaos. And there was nothing like that being published in Australia at the time. And try as I might to kind of calm that down, my comic instinct just kept wrecking everything. And finally I just went, I'll give up. I may never have a career as a writer or a career as anything, but I'll just indulge this kind of comic madness, and at least I'll be happy. And I knew from being a high school teacher that a number of my students enjoyed that anarchistic type comedy. So I knew it wouldn't just be me, but it certainly didn't seem like a good, sensible commercial career move at that point. But
how wrong you were.
Well, yeah, and I think what I did right, accidentally, was to just please myself, and I wasn't trying to guess what kids like and then write that and make them laugh. I was genuinely amusing myself with that stuff, and it was with reference to all the books that I'd loved, such as Alice in Wonderland, Dr. Seuss. There's a mad anarchy running through most most of the kids' books that I loved. And by following that, I pleased myself. And then, if you're genuinely engaged in what you're doing, I think it has the potential to strike a chord with readers. And kids are the first to spot a fake. They'll know if you're trying too hard.
Absolutely.
Or you're trying to get down with them and be one of them. And, you can just strike so many problems so quickly with that the best defence is to be yourself. And I remember very vividly what it was like to be a 10-year-old, at least certainly in terms of my reading and writing and the things I used to laugh about with my friends. And that's my main reference. I think if I was 10, would I be embracing this? And I can get rid of a lot of, okay stuff on that basis, because you need to get it really good, not just okay.
I have to say, my introduction to you, Andy, was through my son, and it was through the Bad Book. And I think I was shocked, and because he hadn't read anything like that before, and he absolutely ate it up. And ever since then, my whole family's been a huge fan of yours, and you've obviously got such a winning formula there. So, well done you for doing that something that's different and making such a success of it.
I'm going to interview
absolutely.
you now.
Okay.
What were you shocked about in that? Was there a story or what was it?
Sorry, there's just a little bit of feedback there. I'm just trying to clear that from the panel. I was shocked, I guess, because it wasn't the norm of what the other books were. It wasn't, fluffy bunnies and, nice and friendly things. I think, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it was about the woman who swallowed, I think it was, she swallowed a poo. And I thought, that's disgusting. And then it just kept going from there. And I thought, oh my God. But my son was loving it. As I said, he was eating up the book. And at the time he was a reluctant reader. So I thought, okay, there's something here. And I remember when my daughter, a few years ago, she picked up, the cat splat on the mat or something like that. And, she sat down and read the whole book in one sitting, and she hasn't done that before. And I thought, this guy's got something here. And as I said, well done, because while it was shocking to me originally, now nothing that you write shocks me, Andy. In fact, I'd be worried if you started writing about fluffy bunnies and all those nice little furry things, because, I think, we expect to be shocked by what you write, but it's a good shock. So, and as I said,
I've lost the element of surprise now.
Yeah, it's a winning formula, definitely.
But I did feel I was working in a very honourable tradition of parody, of cautionary tales. I grew up with a book in the 19th. Well, I didn't grow up in the 19th century. It was written in the 19th century in Germany, late 1800s. By Dr. Heinrich Hoffmann, a book called Shock-Headed Peter. And it was a book of cautionary tales that were done as a picture book, but kids who disobeyed their parents and the horrendous things that happened to them. The girl who played with matches and then got burnt up into a little pile of cinders. The boy who sucked his thumb, and then a man with long red legs and a big pair of scissors came and cut them off. It was totally over the top, yes. Gratuitous violence, but it was done with rhyme and it was done with colourful pictures, and the humour of it, the over the topness, kind of neutralised the horror, so that you just had horror and humour fused together, and that had a huge impact on me, I think, and was what I sought to create for my readers. Was the shock that I felt from Shock-Headed Peter, and what I try to do is make the violence or the disgustingness so over the top that there's no, you're shocked to begin with, but then it just goes on and on and on until you're just going to go, oh, for goodness sakes, and you have to laugh at it. That's my favourite sort of humour.
It works.
It's not funny, but when you keep repeating it, it becomes funny.
It works very well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we know you started writing from 6. So your story ideas continue. Where do you get them from?
I always had just an active imagination that was posing scenarios, and one manifestation of that was asking my mum silly questions. Like, Mum, would you rather be eaten by ants or lions? If you had the choice, which one would you pick? And then she'd pick one, and then I'd argue against it and say, well, you've picked the lions, but why? And she'd say, because it'd be fast. I don't want to be eaten by ants for many months. And I go, yeah, but I didn't say the lions had teeth. And she'd go, oh, well, I'll have the ants then. And I'll say, but as you said, there's thousands of them, there's little mouths. I'll have the lions. Well, go away. But I was actively creating little scenarios like that. And also, we grew up in a neighbourhood with a lot of little kids, and I loved just telling them stories and seeing how outlandish I could make the stories before they said, oh, that's not true. And that was always just a delight, just playing with words, with ideas, and seeing how much supporting detail I could create to make the most ridiculous thing seem like it could have happened. And I guess I've always done that with kids, well before I was writing for them, although I was writing for my friends in the classroom, drawing those little cartoons and parodying the songs of the day with the stuff from our life. So that was always there. There was a strong sense of an audience and playing with the audience, and that's what the books are really an organised form of now.
Now, do you still have the first story that you wrote?
I do. It was called Lost in Time. That was the first formal story I wrote at about the age of 12.
And what's it about?
It was going to the cricket with my father, and I was never very good at football or cricket or even getting very excited about them. But Dad tried. He tried his best, but I would be more interested in everything going on at the stadium, and especially getting the chips and the lemonade at halftime. And it's about me going to get the chips and the lemonade at halftime and realising I'd been transported into the future. And I came back, and it was a futuristic game that was being played, and my struggle to get back to present time. So, time travel. I loved horror comics, science fiction comics, particularly ones that involved time travel and, where the Twilight Zone style stuff, where everything's normal except for one thing has changed, and the character has to deal with that. It's always been exciting to me, and you see that in a book like The Day My Bum Went Psycho. Normal boy, normal world, it's just that his bum has grown arms and legs, jumped off his body and run away. and he deals with it very logically, and the humour comes from the logical response to a completely illogical situation.
Right. Now, are any of your characters based on people you know?
Yes, sometimes very directly, although by the time you get them onto the page and into the story, they've become exaggerated and sometimes a composite of different people. But in the Just book, my first book, Just Tricking, that has me as the main narrator, in the same way as Seinfeld is the main character of that sitcom. And you think, okay, well, he's obviously used his life quite a lot, but then he's felt free to make up other aspects and exaggerate certain aspects of his character. And that's what I did for Just Tricking. I used my best friend, Danny, the girl that I was secretly in love with, Lisa.
Not so much a secret anymore, though.
No, she found out as a result of the book.
Okay.
30 years later.
Okay.
But she was okay with it. Some people were not okay, because Just Tricking was the end of a 10-year kind of process of experimenting and trying different things and trying to find the voice that I was most comfortable writing as. And I didn't know that this would be the one that would actually capture people, but it did, and it started reprinting and going far and wide. And many of the people that I'd used, thinking no one will ever read this, were contacting me, and most were happy, some were unhappy. And so I started changing the names, except for Danny and Lisa. And then I did the same thing in Treehouse, in that it talks about the process of writing a book, which I do with Terry, the illustrator that I've worked with for all of my book, and Jill, my wife, who is the editor. It was the editor on Just Tricking, and we've worked together very closely on the books, and we got married in real life. Oh, we're working on the books in real life too, but there's levels of reality. And in the book, she's the girl who lives on the other side of the forest and comes to fix the fictional Andy and the fictional Terry's problems in the treehouse. In real life, she's fixing the problems with the manuscript.
Okay.
So you take truths and just exaggerate and borrow until it feels. When I'm telling the story, I need to feel that it's actually happening. So I'm kind of convincing myself.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a short break, but before we do, Andy, I believe there's somebody that you want to say hello to.
Oh, yes, Charlotte and Amadine. I'd like to say very good afternoon to you both, and it's probably time to get out of bed now. And just like my daughter, I've asked her to clean her bathroom, so you better clean your bathroom as well.
I like that. All right, we'll be back in.
That's probably not the fun message they were hoping for, but it's a good, useful one.
It is a good one. It's a good one for parents. I like that message. Welcome back. I'm Georgie Donaghy, and you're listening to The Author's Shelf on 2SSR 99.7 FM. My guest today is Andy Griffis. Andy, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about your work with the Indigenous Literacy Foundation.
Well, the foundation is the initiative of the Australian publishing industry, including booksellers and authors and publishers. And the aim is to get books out to remote communities all around Australia, into some of those schools and, occasionally there are no schools, there are no libraries, but to get books into the community so the kids can engage with literacy and learn the vital reading skills. I think the reading rates for kids living in those communities is often only 10 to 15% leave school being able to read. And a large part of that is the lack of books. So the foundation does a number of things. It organises books to the communities and they're books that they want and that they choose. It's not just dumping a load of old books that nobody else wants. They just like people in cities. We need books that are relevant to our lives. So it involves field trips. So authors and illustrators go out into these areas, and I've been on a number of those trips, and I get them to put their experience into a story form, little cartoons, 12-page pocket books, so that involves a picture and just a sentence of writing, and you start to you get a relationship with reading and writing and seeing that it's not so strange and that it's kind of cool to be able to write about an experience you had with a crocodile or an experience at a festival. So it's been going for about 7 or 8 years, and it's now the foundation is working in over 250 communities around Australia, and we're thrilled with how it's doing.
Is that how the book The Naked Boy and the Crocodile came about?
Yes. That was a story written when I was in the Kimberley region, and I asked the kids just to tell me about their life. They can make up a story. Many of their stories involve crocodiles because that's their fact of their lives.
Yes.
And they were better than anything I could make up. And this boy wrote this very nice little picture book about a crocodile that likes eating people, and its favourite food is naked people. And then a boy called Alex goes swimming, gets eaten by the crocodile, chewed up, pooped out, and then the boy escapes. And it's just a very simple narrative, illustrated with simple stick figures, but it makes you laugh, and it demonstrates the skill of an excellent storyteller. So over the years, we collected some of these great little stories and put them out, and the proceeds from that book go to providing more resources for those communities.
It's a great little book, that one. I've had that for some time. Now, Andy, can you tell us about your writing routine? Are you a computer, pen and paper? What's your routine, your writing routine?
I like all of those things. Obviously, I grew up with pen and paper, so that feels very natural. I used a typewriter for many years. I got an old second-hand typewriter when I was in primary school, and I learnt to touch type on that. And then used that for many years. And then when computers came in, I think I got my first computer around late 1980s, I realised I embraced them because of their the ease of which you can rewrite a sentence, a paragraph, a story. I could rewrite a paragraph, 10, 20 times and get it exact, whereas that would have represented 20 hours typing it out physically. So computers to me come into their own in the editing process, but in the early stages, I'll just as soon sit down. It's on a train or a bus or a hotel room. It's almost like you feel like you're not really working. You're just putting some ideas down, sketching out some little pictures to go with them. And that's the best way for me to come up with stuff. And then when I get a big mess, big load of messy notes, then I'll love going to the computer and starting to organise it all, and the story kind of emerges at that point. But then, once having got that story, I could well go back to notes and play with the ideas and develop them in a free form. So yeah, I don't rely on any particular one method, and I do try not to rewrite the stories too early before you've even got a story. You can get obsessed with getting it exact, but that's not the point. The real creative part is messy and all over the place. To a certain extent, it needs to be, and then you need a good clean-up. So you move from messy to clean and orderly, and then back again, and often many times in the same session.
All right, well, that leads me to my next question. Are you familiar with the terms plotter or pantster?
No, can you explain?
Okay, I'm going to explain to the listeners anyway. I heard this at a recent writers' festival. Now, a pantster means putting pen to paper and plotting as you go along, or just writing by the seat of your pants. And a plotter means plotting out your manuscript before you even write it. So my question is, are you a plotter or are you a pantster?
I would be both.
You're an in-betweener like me. Very good.
Yeah, I start with it would be just a description.
Right.
The new book, The 52 Story Treehouse, started with an idea of what would happen if Mr. Big Nose, the publisher, wasn't there to yell at them. They wouldn't be able to get the book done, so they would have to go and find him. So it's that broad. And then with that idea, you start thinking of the levels. You start thinking of which levels they would use in order to be able to find him. And the plot begins to come out in a very vague outline. And then I'll write a scene. I'll often write the opening scenes and the closing scenes. So I'll know where I'm starting, how I want to end, and then it's a process of finding the most creative and interesting way to get from those 2 points. So yeah, I think, and when I get lost in it, in all the detail, that's where I'll pull back and look at the overview and maybe make a list of events. So that's helpful, and then you plunge back into the chaos.
All right, Andy, what's one word that sums you up?
One word.
One word. Come on, just one.
Oh,
Do you want me to leave that question for later? I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I just thought if I was to ask someone, if I asked a member of my family, they'd probably just say annoying.
Okay.
And it was the title of my second book, Just Annoying.
No, we came up with awesome. So it starts with an A.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we think you're pretty awesome. All right, tell us, what's the best thing about being an author?
Well, there's not one thing. There are many things. I love that process I just described. I love that infinite possibility when you start with a story, that you can go anywhere and you can have any type of fun. I love that freedom. And then as the story gets more and more developed, more and more finished, that's when I'm already looking for that next feeling of possibility. So perhaps that would be the best one. But then that's the private one in the office by yourself, and there's many hours of that. But then it's a real thrill and a joy to come out and talk to an audience of real people and see them reacting to all the ideas and arguing with you and giving you new ideas. So that's a very pleasurable part of the process too. So it's there's times where you're in and very introverted, and then there's the tours and the events where you need to call on that other part of yourself, and both are fun, and you can and both you can have too much of. So it's just achieving that balance.
What's the best writing tip that you've been given?
Probably when I began was to learn about writing practice, and to learn that first draft is about putting the pen on the page and writing quickly and not editing, not thinking, not questioning it, not wondering if it's appropriate, but to get it actually onto the page, because then you can work with it. You can either throw it out or you can refine it. But becoming comfortable with that process of whatever comes up, capturing it on the page is essential. And that's, going back to our discussion before, that's how you come up with a piece like there was an old woman who swallowed a poo. If you thought about that, you would never write that.
No.
Because you'd think, oh, well, that's not very nice. But then if you follow it, you parody the old woman who lived in a shoe, and you find that you get a whole new plot. And if you then take that out and read it to an audience, you'll find that it creates great laughter and delight. And so through having been faithful to what came up, you end up with a piece that can please a lot of people, but which personally I or you might have never even written if you'd edited it too soon. So that's a pretty important one, I think.
All right, Andy, I'm going to ask you a question now. Well, I've been asking you questions for a while now. I'm going to ask you, can I ask you about your bum, the series that is? Can you tell us a little bit more about the day your bum went psycho?
Yeah, well, that started with exactly the process I was just describing. I was making a list of outlandish titles for stories, and I think I made about 20 or 30 crazy titles. The day my dog got drunk, and this and that, and then the day my bum went psycho. And out of all those titles, that title jumped out. And I was telling a group one day, they were saying, what's your next book going to be called? And I said, well, it's going to be a serious book. And they all went, we were hoping for something funny. And I said, no, you can't be funny all the time. It's a serious book called The Day My Bum Went Psycho. And they all laughed and found that incredibly funny. And then I thought, gee, what would that book look like? What would cause a bum to go psycho? What would it like to be a bum? And then I began imagining that the working conditions are not pleasant, that not a lot of fun, not a lot of reward, not a lot of respect being a bum, and you would be very jealous of the head and trying to plot and scheme your way to the spot on top of the neck. And so the plot began to develop out of that process of asking those questions. And every time I talked to the kids and told them a bit more about it, they were finding it very amusing. Because we've all been, really what's going on in that story is about embarrassment. and it's about being embarrassed by something that your body has done inadvertently, whether it's a burp or releasing gas or making noise. We've all been surprised by it, and it's like, oh, that wasn't me. That was that part of my body. So I took that idea and said, what if that part of the body had arms, legs, and a mind of its own, and could talk? Then that would be an interesting alteration of reality. So everyone can recognise the truth of being embarrassed by a part of their body. It's just I take it way too far.
And how long does it take you to write a book?
Comfortably a year is a nice time. And you may have been gestating the idea for a few years before that. So I'll be developing a number of ideas without actually working on them, just thinking about them. And if they stay with you, that means it's a good, there's something there. If you forget it, then it's probably never very substantial. But yeah, I would, if I had to break it down, I would say there would be 2 or 3 months of research and outlining and planning, 2 or 3 months of actually writing the first draft, and then 6 months of serious editing and rewriting and shaping and cutting and trialling in front of an audience and making sure that it's doing what I want it to do. And then I think I've used up my 12 months there, but there would be roughly a month to promote the book then on a tour, which is where you get to meet the readers and their parents and see exactly how the books are travelling out there, and then you take that into the next book. So if they're telling, the audience will give you a lot of clues. You know, they'll say, we love this, we love that, we'd like more of this. And you can sense when it's time to change things. So the audience interaction has always been very important too.
Okay. You're listening to The Author's Shelf on 2SSR 99.7 FM. Andy, thank you very much for joining me today. Welcome back. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Terry Denton?
Yes, Terry was assigned to my first book, which was a book of creative writing exercises. They were all little fragments and cartoons and instructions and things that didn't really look like anything to do with a normal story. But it was published by an educational publisher, and I wrote ways for teachers to use them in the classroom to stimulate creative writing and thinking. And the publisher of that book said, who will we get to? I know, we'll get Terry Denton. He's got a good sense of humour. And I saw what he did. That book was called Swinging on the Clothesline, which has now been republished as Once Upon a Slime, 45 Fun Ways to Get Writing Fast. But this was 20 years ago, and Terry's illustrative style was so in tune with what I was doing with words. I was just thrilled and amazed. And we eventually met, and he encouraged me to keep going. He was well established at that stage. I was brand new, and offered to illustrate anything that I did, which was what I needed because the publishers were all a little bit scared and confused by the stuff I was doing. But having us as a package was a little more reassuring to them that at least one half of that team would know what they were doing. And that was just tricking that we published 4 years later, and he was sort of confined to the margins. I said, just put little flick pictures along the bottom, turn the page number into a story, do whatever you want. Don't just do normal book illustration. Make the book look like a practical joke and something that a kid could pick up and play with, even if they had no intention of reading it. And we'll trick them into to reading at least the first paragraph of a story. So that was the case for many years. The first 4 books were done like that, with me spending most of the year writing the stories, and then Terry just turning on a tap of madness for 3 weeks and filling up the margins. But I began to get fascinated by what he was doing in the margins and said, let's bring that out into the main spotlight. We'll reduce my input and increase yours. So we started meeting on a weekly basis and writing the book that became the Bad Book. So you see me changing my role from the main storyteller to more of a team player and almost a script writer, working with and for Terry, and encouraging each other to sillier and sillier places. So the Bad Book was very important for me because it was really the beginning of the rhyming books, The Cat on the Mat is Flat and A Big Fat Cow That Goes Kapow, and is really the basis of the Treehouse series. It's that a little bit of text and a lot of picture, and the Treehouse turns that into a full-length narrative. But we got there by experimenting and just messing about with the Bad Book.
I was going to ask you actually, the Treehouse series it's not number 52, but it's called 52.
Yep.
Is out. It's hot off the presses, isn't it?
It's it's going to be published in. There's a countdown clock because so many kids have been hanging out for it and asking us. So I think we're down to about 15 days now.
Wow.
Which is incredibly gratifying that the kids are enjoying it so much and so excited about books and reading, even in an age where there are many different technologies competing for everyone's attention. The book has that particular pleasure that that you can't, I love movies and I love music and limited appetite for computer games, but there's pleasures to be had from all these. But a book gives you that particular one that you are creating a world from black marks on a page, and you make it very personal to you. So I'm thrilled that I've managed to convey my love of books, such as Shock-Headed Peter that I was talking about, and Dr. Seuss, Enid Blyton, Lewis Carroll, and I think Enid Blyton, I'm probably in huge debt to her because I loved The Magic Faraway Tree, and the Treehouse is really a kind of version of that infinite tree that's a world of all of its own.
Okay, thank you for that. What advice do you have for those who are starting on their journey to publication?
I think you cannot beat establishing a writing practice, and I'd recommend a book, Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, as a sure guide to the training aspect, quite apart from actually writing stories. It's a good training to get just your hand, your mind used to putting thoughts into words and exploring yourself. And if you commit to that type of process, you'll find your writing stories that are utterly unlike anything you might have thought you were going to write. So that writing practice is important, and a reading practice is just as important. I think connecting with the type of books that you loved, if you're writing for children, connecting with those type of books that you loved as a child, they are like textbooks telling you what to do and how to do it. And so I'm continually revisiting the stuff I loved as a child. And I don't only read children's books, but it is a huge help to me. And I keep discovering new ones. I've just discovered probably the last person in the world to discover Pippi Longstocking. And just astonished at how silly it is, how fast-moving it is. There's no long passages of description. There's no attempt to underline a moral. There's no boring bits. And I say those because they're often the faults of beginning writers for kids. There's too many words. So if you go back to some of the great books and say, why have these lasted? It's a really important part of being a writer. And I think it's often easily neglected. people will say, I just want to be a writer, I just want to tell stories. I don't have time for reading. That to me would be a red light, saying, I don't think your stories are going to be that great. If you think you can work in total isolation from some of the greatest storytellers ever. And, I'm talking fairy tales, tales from across the world, Pinocchio, and so many great children's stories, and they share so many elements.
Thank you sorry, Andy.
So I'm passionate about educating yourself as a writer and through reading.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All those are wonderful tips. Now, what was the name of that book? Writing Down the Bones by
Natalie Goldberg.
Okay, I'll put that information on our Facebook page later on this afternoon.
Sure.
If you'd like to find out more about Andy, visit his website, www.andygriffiths.com.au, or you can also follow Andy on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Andy G Books. Andy Griffiths, thank you very much for joining us on the Author's Shelf this afternoon.
Thank you. It's been lovely to have the time to go in depth on a few aspects that often you don't get a chance to talk about. So I really appreciate that.
And you're about to embark on your big 52-story treehouse tour soon?
Yes. Yep. It'll be a really fun thing, and I'd like to reassure the parents that even though the boys' diet in the treehouse consists of marshmallows and lemonade and chocolate and all those things that are not good for you, 52-story treehouse has a pro-vegetable eating theme and message.
Okay.
So I'll have the kids eating their greens.
Very good.
As a result of this book.
Very good. Thank you very much.